for procured?
Please give us some, with the Public Accounts Committee, give us some numbers.
I don't have the numbers from that contract today, but I'm happy to write.
Are we talking tens or hundreds?
You
You can't tell us how many mobile classrooms you've actually provided since you took the decisions to close the schools is what used to be known at school when I was a kid as a complete giveaway, isn't it?
Okay.
One of my schools, I found out it was not going to open on Monday, on Saturday morning. Do you know how I found out?
Well, you'll have to wait to find out later on in the video, won't you? But hello there, and I do hope you're all well, and I do hope you all had a fantastic weekend too. Now, that was last Monday's Public Accounts Committee meeting, where they were discussing the condition of school buildings with Susan Ackland Hood, Permanent Secretary Department for Education, and Jane Cunliffe, Chief Operating Officer Operations and Infrastructure Group for the Department for Education. And what you might just hear next could just absolutely blow your mind.
Thank you. You did your survey, you went out to all the schools, if they came back and said they had RAAC, and then you tried to survey them, and you put them into three categories, Ms. Allen, which was high or critical, medium and low. Is that correct?
4 categories, so it's critical, high, medium and low.
Okay. And then the question we've been asked again and again is, why did all this happen just before the start of term? Why didn't you deal with it long before then, over the summer holidays? My understanding is, I'd like you to confirm if it's right, is because when that beam just over a couple of weeks ago fell into a classroom, which because of the summer holidays was unoccupied, it was in a school that had been categorised as low. Yes. And that's what really kicked the whole thing off, wasn't it? That's when the system went into overdrive, because you thought it was a low risk and the ceiling came in.
We've had, I think the answer is yes, because you already said it.
Right, okay, so right.
I think it's a bit... I just want to be very clear about this, because I don't want to be misleading to the committee. Right. The decision was made on the basis of a collection of cases.
Right.
But the last of them was very late in the summer.
Right.
So ministers were considering this over the summer and were doing things like asking us to go and speak in detail to iStruct. We were having those conversations, but the third of the cases that was highly relevant to this...
I mean, no pun in, we're tight for time, no pun intended. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's why, you know, to the layman, it all appeared to happen at the last minute, right? Now, there are surveys and surveys.
Yes.
The problem with RAAC is you often can't tell with a visual inspection whether or not it's dangerous. You have to intrusively go into the wall or the ceiling and take a sample. So what a lot of the schools were told is you did visual inspections and then you told the heads, don't worry, you're clear, and they breathed out. I get this from my own heads. And now you're going back to those schools and saying, oh, awfully sorry, just to be sure, we now need to go and do an intrusive inspection, so we've got to do nearly all of them again. Why didn't you just explain that 5 minutes ago? Is that good?
I don't think that's quite right.
Well, that's what my head teachers are telling me.
So we've got... there's two different things. So our survey programme is principally a visual inspection programme, and that is one of the reasons why we are concerned about whether or not we can be secure in the judgments about whether it's critical, high, medium or low. But we've got... We don't have a programme of going back and doing intrusive surveys in order to categorise. We've moved to the position of saying if RAAC is present, it should be remediated.
Sorry, forgive me. As I said in the House on Monday, there is a dichotomy between what officials are telling MPs and what they're telling head teachers. A number of my head teachers have told me themselves, I know these heads, that they were told in the first case, stand down, we've done a visual inspection, and now they're being told, no, we've got to come back.
That was early in the summer, is what you're referring to.
Into the wall, yes, exactly. So how many of these surveys have now got to be done again from scratch? How many?
The surveys that we did don't need to be done again because they all confirm the presence or not of RAAC.
Yes.
Previously, they were also grading the RAAC. We're now saying, because of the change in guidance, if RAAC is present, our advice is to close that area. So we don't need to redo the surveys because the survey was confirming whether RAAC was there or not.
So why are you telling head teachers that you do? Do you want me to read you the names of the schools and the heads?
No.
Why are you doing that?
Miss Ackland.
So I think I think there might be a confusion between two different things here. So, or possibly even three. So There are some schools that need a resurvey because of access issues, because it was difficult to get full access under the ceiling. That's different from doing a full intrusive survey where you drill into the fittings. And the further access is needed to establish where RAAC is present in the school. So that's one place where we might have come and done a survey and then come back and said we need to do another survey. The second thing that we're seeing some responsible bodies saying they want to do intrusive surveys as part of their mitigation measures, and if that's what they want to do, we're supporting that. But our programme doesn't involve resurveying with intrusive surveys because we've moved away from the categorisation approach towards mitigation, and that is because to do the kind of full intrusive survey that is required to understand the bearing ends, you have to vacate the space for a significant period of time, and you have to prop the area in order to make sure that you aren't...
Yeah, we've seen this in hospital.
That you aren't causing a difficulty. And if you're going to vacate the space and put a prop of some kind in, you might as well mitigate, because you're highly likely when you do the intrusive survey to find at least one beam.
Can I humbly suggest?
Mr. Frank.
So I think
no, I'm trying.
We're clearly not getting the communication of this right, and so let me take that away, and we will talk to the individual schools.
Forgive me, but as you know,
sure
I've had a school in my pack. I've had this for 2 years. You're right. You're not getting it right, with respect. Now, mobile classrooms. A number of heads in my patch were rapidly promised mobile classrooms, and then they were told a few days later they weren't coming. So, straight question, straight answer. Since you did this, how many mobile classrooms have you provided to schools which are affected, Ms. Cunliffe? What's the number?
So I don't have the number with me today.
Why not?
Because some of the mobile... So the contracts we've put in place centrally, we started recently over the summer because we were worried about having the supply for the critical places already. The delivery of those will be dependent. I know that there's a school which has had delays because of the ground that we have to put the mobile classrooms on. And then some responsible bodies will procure their own.
So how many is the department paid for, procured?
Please give us some, with the Public Accounts Committee, give us some numbers.
I don't have the numbers from that contract today, but I'm happy to write.
Are we talking tens or hundreds?
We were called back to give us answers on these points. I mean,
are we talking tens, 30, 50, 80, or are we talking several hundred?
So obviously we're working in a very live situation with a lot of these schools.
We appreciate
so
that.
I will give you the number, but we
must
don't
know.
have it
Or you must, even if really, we'd expect you to come with that, frankly, in the room today. But we need to know how many you've procured. But you surely have a handle as well, as Mr. Francois was rightly highlighting, on how many other schools are procured instead, because that might be less for you to worry on.
You mentioned Hockley Primary. Absolutely faithfully promised by your officials there would be 8 mobile relocatables there from the 4th of September. I was sitting in the minister's office when I was told it. I go and tell the parents in all good faith. Then find out, you just had a note, then find out, oh no, sorry, they're not turning up till mid-November. So of course all the parents are furious because the MP told them in all good faith it would be September, because the minister and the officials told him that, sitting in the department. So this is my point. There's a complete disconnect between what you are telling members of Parliament and ministers and what is happening on the ground. And the fact you cannot tell this committee, this is a recall session, you've had plenty of warning, you can't tell us how many mobile classrooms you've actually provided since you took the decisions to close the schools, is what used to be known at school when I was a kid as a complete giveaway, isn't it?
Okay.
Isn't it?
I think isn't a question. I think they made the point, but I think the point here is we did expect some numbers on these issues. And if every classroom that's late, you've got responsible bodies, as we've all heard, and we've got evidence on, have been buying their own, which might ease the contract that you're running, but you're fishing from the same pool. So this is it's important to get these figures.
One more on communication, then I'll hand back.
Can we just probably finish on this point, and then we'll come back to.
I've got one more, then I'll hand back to the chair.
Ms. McIntyre.
So. I completely understand the committee's frustration on this. The central contracts that Jane is talking about were put in place over the summer. So there are a group of schools for whom we have
This is the ones before the change in guidance.
So there's a group,
we know that. Yeah.
There's a group of schools for whom we have paid for mobile classrooms who were identified before the change of decision. And we will write to the committee and give the number of mobile classrooms that we've paid for those schools. It's true that the number will be small. And the number will be small because
this is different
for the vast majority of those schools, as with the schools since the decision, in the vast majority of cases, they have found it possible to use other space. And we've worked to try and get the right balance between remediation of the space in the school, which is often a better solution than a mobile classroom, and the provision of mobile classrooms. But we will write to the committee and set that
on that. Okay, but there's three. Then there's
those,
the ones that only needed it after the change on the 31st of August.
Again, in terms of those who've needed it after the change since the 31st of August, the committee will understand that because our target time frame for providing a demountable classroom, which has to be given foundations, it has to be connected to electricity and water, that in many cases we have to seek planning permission. The most accelerated timescale we thought we could manage for those was 2 weeks, and 2 weeks has not yet passed since the announcement. So I just give you that piece of context. So we're working with schools now to make sure we can order them as rapidly as possible, but 2 weeks has not yet passed.
Do you appreciate some parents are paid weekly, not everyone's paid monthly, and they've now been told, they get a letter from their head out of the blue saying they've been told the school has to close, they're going to have to take time off work to look after their child. Yeah, and I'm sorry.
I think, again, the critical thing is that we've got pupils in face-to-face learning, and I'm.
But in several of my schools, you don't. You don't. Now look, one more, and then I'll hand back to the chair.
You're talking about, I believe all the pupils are in face-to-face
learning. No, I'm not. I wasn't just Hockley. They're not in face-to-face learning in Bromfords. They're not in face-to-face learning in Wyburns, right? In terms of communications, one more, and then I'll hand back to the chair. When all this broke, the schools were shut. MPs were given details of which schools were affected, but not necessarily to the degree. Had mobile numbers for some of the head teachers, didn't for others, rang the school, no one there. Really anxious to find out, trying to find out from the department, ringing up one head saying, do you by any chance have a mobile number for this other head so I can speak to them? One of my schools, I found out it was not going to open on Monday, on Saturday morning. Do you know how I found out? I bumped into the head teacher in the gym. Do you think that is an acceptable level of communication from your department?
So we made every effort we could to make sure that MPs understood the status of the schools in their constituencies that were affected. And we were communicating as much as we possibly could, both with the schools and responsible bodies and with MPs. And as you observe, there were some challenges in the fact that term had not yet begun, and so it was challenging to get in touch with some schools and responsible bodies, but we made every possible effort that we could, and wherever we had information, we passed it on.
So why did I only find that out because I happened to bump into this person and say we're about to get on the jogging machine?
Well, as Susan said, we made every effort to contact MPs. We also established an MP line for people to call in and get information about the cases. Obviously,
Obviously, it didn't work in every case.
One last thing. Your Secretary of State said she was the only person who's been working hard on this. Some of your civil servants have worked incredibly hard on this. I'm sure you have too. And so did two junior ministers. Baroness Barron has been knocking herself out on this for a year, and so has Nick Gibb, the schools minister. So there's a whole bunch of people who have been working really hard on this. Perhaps the Secretary of State owes some of her own team an apology. Do you agree?
No, I don't. The Secretary of State has been generous, I think, in recognising work done in the department. I don't think she did intend to suggest that others hadn't been working hard. I can say is, on behalf of the department, I'm really grateful. I think schools, responsible bodies and teachers up and down the country, as I said at the beginning of the hearing, have worked unbelievably hard in what were very difficult circumstances at short notice, and I am incredibly grateful to them, because the result of that has been that we do have most pupils in face-to-face learning, even in the schools that were affected. And all I can say is these things only happen when people are working as hard as they possibly can in partnership with each other. And
work their socks off. The problem is what your officials tell them keeps changing by the day. Anyway, Dame Meg,
I think Mr. Francois paid tribute to those who've been working.
Sounds like an absolute mess, doesn't it? No, I've no time for our weekend warrior. Yes, our Brexit Spartan, Mark Francois. But in this situation, I do have a little tinge of sympathy, because when you've given reassurances to people and then things change after, it makes you look like a bit of a liar or an idiot or I suppose both as well. But what do you guys think? Let me know down below, and if you got something out of the video, give it a like. And if you're new to my channel and enjoy stuff in the House of Commons or in select committee meetings like here, subscribe. And it just leaves me to say farewell and take care, my friends.